Brian Hayes returned to the lineup yesterday. The Pittsburgh Pirates lost. Termarr Johnson was recently promoted to the Greensboro Grasshoppers, and the Pittsburgh Pirates head to Milwaukee in what could end up being a pretty big series. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Pirates, brought to you by eBay Motors.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to that Pirates podcast, everybody. My name is Ethan Smith, your host of the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your Pittsburgh Pirates all the time. And yesterday's game, not much to take away from it. The Pirates lost to the Detroit Tigers 6-3 yesterday. Of course, had the bases loaded with 2 outs, big chance to potentially tie or win the game with Brian Hayes returning. He looks at strike 3. I say strike 3. It was a ball high up in the zone. The umpire was calling it all day, though, so you can't really give too much of an excuse for not at least trying to foul that off. Not really in his skill set, but, you know, it happened. But Brian Hayes, of course, did return to the lineup yesterday, was most recently rehabbing in Indianapolis, where he did okay. Went 0 for 4 yesterday with an RBI and a strikeout in his return to third base, and hadn't played since July 6th against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Has been dealing with low back inflammation again, something that we saw that he dealt with a little bit last season that sidelined him, and it is becoming a little worrisome with Brian Hayes that he is dealing with these injuries as often as he has. Obviously, we remember in what was supposed to be his first full MLB season back in 2021, he broke his wrist the second game of the season after homering in the first game of the season against the Chicago Cubs at Wrigley Field on opening day. That sidelined him for a couple months. Of course, last year he was dealing with some things, and now this year dealing with some low back inflammation. But what's very interesting about all this is Brian Hayes, despite the injuries, despite all that, was the first guy to get the big extension from the Pittsburgh Pirates. Of course, Brian Reynolds surpassed him earlier this year. And despite only 75 games this year by Brian Hayes, he's still tied for 6th among all of Major League Baseball in defensive runs saved this season. So we already know that. The glove is going to always play for Brian Hayes at third base. But at some point, we want to see, 1, him stay healthy, and 2, bring the bat up a little bit with the defensive acumen that you bring at the hot corner, because I've said it on this show before, and I'll say it again, he's the best defensive third baseman in all of baseball and arguably one of the better defensive players in all of baseball. He should already have a Gold Glove under his belt, but he doesn't, due to the fact that the Gold Glove Award, for some odd reason, is voted on and won by players because of something that doesn't even involve defense, which is what you do on offense. And, you know, of course, a big talking point over the last, say, 2 or 3 weeks or so has been the play of Jared Triolo in the absence of Brian Hayes. And Jared Triolo, talked about him earlier this year. He's a guy who has a very good glove over at third base, not as good as Hayes. That's just unfair to even compare the two defensively. He played 26 games at third base, though, and has 2 outs above average. You're not going to be mad at that at all. And Triolo has also hit the ball pretty well. He's done fine in that department. He's gotten on base. He had a good hitting streak going before the All-Star break, and then continued it after the All-Star break, despite the Pirates losing a bunch of games in that span. So it makes you wonder, what do you do now with a guy like Jared Triolo? Because Brian Hayes, as long as he is healthy and available, is going to play that position. 1, due to financial commitment. Two, due to the fact that he's the best defensive third baseman in baseball, and you're going to want his glove over there at all costs. And Jared Triolo as well is a flexible player in the minor leagues. If you followed his minor league career at all, Jared Triolo was the kind of guy that ultimately slid all over the diamond. He was a shortstop at times. He could play second base. So that makes me think now, with the trade deadline now behind us and G-Man Choi and Carlos Santana no longer on the roster, you look at the first base situation, and it's a lot like it has been the last couple years, where it's just going to be whatever it ends up being. Connor Joe more than likely will man that spot for the most part. We'll see what happens with Alfonso Rivas, who they acquired in the Rich Hill G-Man Choi trade from San Diego. He also plays first base and noted Pirate killer when he played for the Chicago Cubs in 2021. It's interesting, though, because Triolo, you can argue, has been a better player at the plate than Connor Joe. I can almost certainly tell you Jared Triolo, just based off of the way he's played over the past 20-something games, he's probably going to be better than Alfonso Rivas, who I noted in my trade deadline show on Tuesday has had a really, really good run of things lately in AAA. He's the typical quad A player. But I think you have to flirt with the idea of having Triolo at first base at some point. And obviously, you saw they traded Rodolfo Castro. Tucupita Marcano is going to have surgery to repair his torn ACL. So now that opens up things a little bit in the middle infield. And when I say a little bit, I mean you still have Nick Gonzalez, Leo Piguero, and Aliko Williams. And then eventually G1 Bay will probably try to make his way back into the mold. So I don't know if Triolo could really do the second base shortstop thing, along with Oneil Cruz probably starting rehab at some point in the month of August. It gets really interesting to what you do with Jared Triolo. And I'm sure the Pirates will find somewhere to put him, because as Gary and myself would always say, if the bat plays, you're going to be in the lineup somewhere. And I wouldn't even mind Jared Triolo playing shortstop once Oneil Cruz returns, and just letting Cruz focus on hitting for the remainder of the year if he does indeed come back. There were some streaks to know about this Pirates team and some of their players following the loss to the Detroit Tigers yesterday. Of course, Andrew McCutchen had his much-needed performance. He slotted his first multi-hit game since June 30th against Milwaukee. He had not had a game the entire month of July with more than one hit in said game, so he really, really needed that. And him getting hot, of course, will mean a lot for this lineup. And the Pirates, even despite the loss yesterday, are 6-4 in their last 10 games. And going back to Kutch, he's batting 192 in his last 15. So you really want him to ramp it up a little bit. You want him to get back to the way he was playing earlier this year and help this lineup out a bit. Henry Davis, who has most recently been in the cleanup spot, has not been good at the plate at all lately. Batting 1 for 27 in his last 27 appearances with a .037 batting average over his last 7. It happens to the best of them with rookies, but I am confident that he'll come back and be able to at least not do that again. Brian Reynolds has heated up over the past few days as well. He's been batting .333 over his past 7 and is currently on a 6-game hitting streak. Brian Reynolds kind of having a reverse of what we're used to from what he usually does during the season. Usually starts cold and ends hot. He's doing what he usually does. Sorry, my bad. I thought about that way wrong. He usually starts cold and ends hot. This year he did start a little hot at the beginning of April, but then it kind of teetered down to what we were used to from April and May Reynolds. Now I'm expecting him for the remainder of the year to just hit the baseball really well, and I hope he continues to do so. Aliko Williams has 4 hits in his past 4 games, a guy that not a lot of people have expected much from. Has a phenomenal glove over shortstop, can turn the double plays with Piguero or Gonzalez at the snap of a finger. Never really expected much out of him from the hitting department, but if he can continue to hit like this, that is a welcome surprise for this Pittsburgh Pirates team. Jack Sawinski has at least 1 strikeout in his past 7 games, including 3 yesterday. I think the biggest thing with Jack Sawinski, and it's something I might talk about tomorrow, is we just need to see some more consistency from the guy. I know he is the prototype 3 common outcomes guy in the new Major League Baseball world where it's either a walk, strikeout, or a home run. But you got to be more consistent, man. Put the ball in play. You have enough power to do it, and you can do good things with it. And Ryan Barucki continues to impress as well, slotting 2 more innings yesterday, continuing his appearance without an earned run streak to 5 straight games. Ryan Barucki has come on and done some very good things. Not the lefty that we all expected to be the good lefty in the bullpen this year with the signing of Harleen Garcia in the offseason, who has not pitched at all this year due to injury, and of course Jose Hernandez, who has kind of struggled a little bit as of late. But Ryan Barucki coming on and looking like a pretty good bullpen arm for this Pittsburgh Pirates team, and they could really use it going down the stretch of the season. And before we get to Termarr Johnson being called up to the Greensboro Grasshoppers and some other top minor league performers, I want to talk to you guys about Sleeper. Sleeper is the one place to have some fun and make some money. Get up to a $100 match on your first deposit on mobile only at sleeper.com/promo code locked on. Do you think, Brian Reynolds, who's been hot as of late, could hit a home run tonight against the Milwaukee Brewers? Well, we sure do. And on Sleeper, you can swing for the fences with up to 100 times payouts. All you have to do is choose 2 or more players that you like and select more or less on their stat categories like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right, and you could win big. Obviously, Sleeper has stuff from all kinds of facets for the MLB world. I'm pulling up the app right now, and it says I have to update it, but I'm on it every day. They're constantly updating the app to make sure that you can do all that good stuff. Dynamic payouts are live. What are dynamic payouts, you ask? In short, each player projection now has a multiplier attached to it, as opposed to preset multipliers based on the number of legs in a contest. With dynamic payouts also comes more stat categories to place contests on, and you can get higher payouts than other apps with less picks. So use promo code Locked On, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. It's currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. And I would go make some money because I could see Brian Reynolds hitting a home run tonight against the Milwaukee Brewers and Adrian Hauser. We'll talk about that in the third segment, but before we talk about that, Termarr Johnson, Pirates' number 1 overall prospect on MLB Pipeline, 2021 first-round pick out of high school, by the way, Mays High School in Atlanta, Georgia, was recently called up from the Bradenton Marauders to the Greensboro Grasshoppers. He got plenty of time in Bradenton, and this is his first full professional season at Bradenton. Last year when he was drafted, he was drafted in 2022, I'm sorry. But last year, he played a little bit, not a ton. This year, he's getting his first full season of action. 75 games at single-A Bradenton, 250 at-bats. He's slashing 244, 419, 448, and 867 with 13 home runs, 44 RBIs. And one of my favorite stats about Termarr Johnson, 88 strikeouts and 72 walks. 72! That's awesome. But he also had a 142 WRC plus in Bradenton. Of course, he gets called up to the Greensboro Grasshoppers from single-A Bradenton to high-A Greensboro, in large part to the strong July that he had, which featured 77 at-bats, a 260, 468, 545, and over 1,000 OPS, 6 home runs, 18 RBIs, 30 walks to 18 strikeouts, a 1.67 walk-to-strikeout rate, and he also had a stretch of games where he homered 4 times in 5 games. Termarr Johnson is the truth, folks. Now, as I mentioned before, he is the number 1 prospect on MLB Pipeline right now. I would expect once they fully update it with the draft picks that Paul Skeens will likely be the number 1 guy, and Johnson will be number 2. Either way, both of those guys are going to be phenomenal. But Termarr Johnson, obviously, his ETA on MLB Pipeline is 2025. It'll be some time before we see Termarr Johnson, but I've been locked in on his minor league career ever since we drafted him, just because he was one of my favorite players out of that draft, and I'm so happy the Pirates drafted him. And I'm already liking the fact that he's bringing down the strikeout rate, which was above like 30% at one point this season. And he's walking a lot too. He's very disciplined at the plate. He has some very good power behind him, a 70 hit tool that he's going to use to his advantage throughout his minor league career. And one thing that I would caution a lot of people with a guy like Termarr Johnson is just be careful when we're looking at just statistical output in Greensboro. If you've ever been to that stadium is just a hitter's ballpark. It's a minor league baseball hitter's ballpark where guys' stats just inflate like balloons. But we're going to talk about a certain player here in a moment that actually pitched very well in Greensboro. But on Johnson, if you guys want to find something fun to watch down the stretch of the season, find a way to get MILB TV, or find a way to listen on the radio, or find a way to watch the games and watch Termarr Johnson play, man. The kid, he has a boomstick, and he's only like 5'8". And he has a lot of growth to do. He's only going to get better. And again, bringing down the strikeout rate, that to me shows significant development already, because that's something that he saw as an issue, the coaches saw as an issue, they wanted him to fix, and they got it fixed. That's all you want from these young guys. You just want things to be able to be fixed for these young guys at a lower level, so that when they get to Altoona, when they get to Indianapolis, and then when they eventually get to Pittsburgh, they're not as big as an issue. And Termarr Johnson, I think, is going to make a phenomenal player once he gets up here around that 2025 range. I do see a world where Termarr Johnson gets a cup of coffee at September call-ups or late September in 2024, and we see him in the middle of 2025. If he continues on the trajectory that he's currently on. Now, if he doesn't, probably middle of 2025, late 2025. But he's still a phenomenal prospect. He's a top prospect in the system. And he's somebody everybody should know as Pittsburgh Pirates fans, because he's just awesome. He's very good player. You love to see it, and especially you love to see it at the Pirates minor league system, which by Fangraphs was rated number 1 post-trade deadline. Something that I figured I'd bring up. Some other top minor league performers. You already know the first one. I have to talk about him. Anthony Solometto, one of my favorite prospects in the Pittsburgh Pirates system, joined Altoona not too long ago and has pitched 7 games in Altoona already. 33 2/3 innings pitched, a 3.48 ERA, 36 strikeouts to 7 walks, a 1.16 WHIP. The 252 opposing batting average is kind of worrisome for me, but obviously when you're making the jump up from single A to double A, things are going to get a little spicy for you in terms of what you're facing. You're facing guys that could be fringe MLB players. You're facing guys that are top prospects more often, but still very good to see that he has a 36 K to 7 base on balls ratio. You really like to see that, which is almost 4-1 or 5-1. It's actually over 5-1. It's like 5.0 something on the rate to strikeouts and walks. And his most recent start was yesterday. He pitched 5 innings, allowed 3 runs with 3 strikeouts. Anthony Solometto, keep an eye on the kid. You're going to see him next year. Left-handed pitcher. He's going to continue to do great things in the Pirates system, and he's among that big group of Pirates pitchers that we're all excited for, including a little bit younger, little bit lower in the system. Thomas Harrington has done some pretty good things as of late. He just recently joined Greensboro, I believe, about a month and a half ago. Maybe farther down than that, seeing as he's already pitched 11 games with the Grasshoppers. But 53 2/3 innings pitched for Harrington, a 4.36 ERA, 67 strikeouts to 13 walks, a 1.4 WHIP. Obviously, you see the 290 opposing batting average. Again, Greensboro is just a hitter's park. So seeing the ERA not be that high, as well as the case of the walk rate being very good for Harrington, is something you want to see at his lower level development. He's only allowed more than 3 earned runs in a start twice in Greensboro, though, out of those 11 games, which is very good to mention, as I've mentioned already, that Greensboro is a very offensive park. His most recent start, of course, came on August 1st, going 7 innings with 1 earned run and 12 strikeouts. Thomas Harrington, very good pitcher. Definitely in the lower end of what you would be worried about more recently, more of a 2025, 2026 guy. But with the way these Pirates pitchers have developed quickly in the system, you never really know. Here's a fun name that we haven't heard in a while. Lonnie White Jr. joined Bradenton 18 games ago. Since joining Bradenton, 18 games, 64 at-bats. He's slashing 250, 402, 453, and 855. 3 home runs and 12 RBIs with 4 stolen bases. He is currently on a 5-game winning streak, but if you've watched any Bradenton baseball over the last couple of days, Lonnie White Jr. has 11 total bases in his past 2 games, 6 yesterday, 5 the day before, currently on a 5-game hitting streak. Yeah, Lonnie White Jr., who decided, by the way, not to go to Penn State and play football and decided to become a Pittsburgh Pirate. So good on him because he seems like he might start making the climb. Outfielder Matt Frazier, who's been in Altoona all season, guy that I talked about a lot last year, has kind of lost some of that power that we've seen from him recently. He's played 85 games in Altoona this year. 308 at-bats, 253, 331, 360, 691 OPS, 6 home runs, 34 RBIs. He's hit safely in 7 of his past 10 games. This is a lot of information, so keep up with me here. He's hit safely in 7 of his past 10 games, reached safely in 8 of his past 10 games, and has an RBI in 4 of his past 10 games. So Matt Frazier doing some good things down there for the Altoona Curve. And before we get into the Pirates series against the Milwaukee Brewers, which features 4 games against the Milwaukee Brewers in Wisconsin. Thank you guys for tuning in, as you always do. Please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Locked On Pirates or at MVP_Ethan. Do all that stuff. The Pittsburgh Pirates head to the Milwaukee Brewers to face them for 4 more games. And in past years, it's been the St. Louis Cardinals that have given the Pirates fits. Now, the Milwaukee Brewers and the Chicago Cubs this year. Pirates are 1-5 against the Brewers entering this series. If you remember, the only game that they did win against the Milwaukee Brewers was, of course, that Apple TV Friday night game that featured Carlos Santana hitting a walk-off home run at PNC Park against the Milwaukee Brewers. Carlos Santana, of course, now a Milwaukee Brewer himself. So not what you really like to see from this Pirates team, because even if that record was 3-3, they'd be 7 back of the Brewers and would have a little bit more of a make it interesting topic to this. They've always scored 4 runs or more in 2 of the 6 games against Milwaukee. That's been, I think, the biggest issue that I've had with the games against Milwaukee is they're just not scoring against the Brewers. They've allowed 6.5 runs per game against Milwaukee, a team that just doesn't have that great of an offense, and you saw that with the trade deadline that the Brewers had, while the Pirates are only scoring 4.2 runs per game. And the Brewers entered this game a half game back of the Reds, but with what's happened with the Reds and the Cubs, with the Cubs scoring double-digit runs against the Cincinnati Reds to kick off this month of August, Brewers only have a 2.5-game lead on the Cubs right now. So the Cubs, who decided not to sell Cody Bellinger or Marcus Stroman, of course, just went to the IL, really creeping up on this Milwaukee team, who decided to buy as well. And the Cubs, of course, bought with Jaime Candelario. And the Pirates, of course, 9 games back of the Brewers. So I would say this is probably your last chance to really close the gap and make it interesting. Now, I'm not saying if the Pirates sweep the Brewers, yeah, I'll start having a conversation. We can start having a conversation if the Pirates somehow win these 4 games in Milwaukee. Do I expect that? No. Could they split in Milwaukee? Sure. Just the way they played against the Brewers has not been great. The pitching kind of worries me because the Saturday start is to be determined for the Pittsburgh Pirates against Corbin Burnes. Don't really like that. But William Contreras has had a strong past 10 games for the Milwaukee Brewers. He's 12 for 41 with 5 doubles and a home run. Despite all that, the Brewers have not played good baseball lately. They're 3-7 in their last 10. They're batting .239 over that span and have an ERA of 5.19. So not anything great for Milwaukee right now. And they're coming off of a series loss to the Nationals, which the Pirates fans know what happens after you lose a game to the Washington Nationals to drop to 20-9. Things get a little interesting. And they were swept the series before that against the Atlanta Braves. Braves are just a powerhouse team. So Milwaukee, of course, not playing its best baseball as of late. So if you're the Pirates, you look at that and you say, we're 6-4 in our last 10. We've played decent baseball. We've won 2 series and tied a series in our last 3. Go into this series riding a high, folks. Of course, the probable pitchers, Mitch Keller will be on the mound tonight against Adrian Hauser. Keller with the ERA advantage, the only ERA advantage, or second to only ERA advantage the Pirates will see in the series. Quinn Priester, of course, will face Colin Rea. Quinn Priester, winner of his last 2 starts, but has not pitched all that great. Just a matter of the run support. Of course, I already mentioned on Saturday, Corbin Burnes will be facing somebody. I would assume that it'll probably be Bailey Falter, the Pirates acquisition for Rodolfo Castro. That would make sense. It could be Luis Ortiz. Anybody in that realm would make sense. I doubt they go with a bullpen game here. Johan Oviedo will face Freddie Peralta on Sunday to end the series. And something I learned just before I started recording this show today, Pirates Brewers is on Fox tonight, folks. It's on Fox, 7:15 Eastern time. So enjoy the game tonight, everybody. Make sure you follow at Locked On Pirates wherever you get your podcasts. It could be Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, whatever floats your boat. Also follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, and topics about the Pittsburgh Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Ethan Smith. Enjoy the game tonight. Be talking about it on Twitter, and I'll see you tomorrow.